Next up is Benton Crane, the CEO of Harmon, the agency behind some of the most viral ads in internet history. Since 2013, they've driven more than 1 billion views and over $300 million in sales. So in his talk, Benton's going to outline the marketing roadmap that you need to transform your small brand into a big-time brand that people know, love, and trust. You'll walk away knowing the exact marketing messages to focus on at each stage of your business to keep leveling up. Benton, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the stage.
Hi all my friends, this is Benton Crane, CEO of Harmon Brothers. Now we are the agency that brought you many of the famous campaigns that you've seen online. Campaigns like Poopery, Squatty Potty, Chatbooks, Fiberfix, Purple Mattresses, Lumi Deodorant, and the list goes on. Many of these campaigns have been viewed tens of millions of times, many of them even hundreds of millions of times. And collectively, they've driven hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. I want to talk to you about the path of how do you go from an obscure startup to becoming a household brand, a brand that people know and trust and remember. I want you to think for a second about what you would consider a household brand. So for me, names like Nike, Apple, Coca-Cola, these are brands that come to mind. When I mentioned all of the campaigns that we've worked on, you didn't hear about a Nike or an Apple or a Coca-Cola. Becoming a household brand takes time. But the brands that we talked about that we've done campaigns for, these are all very recent, young brands, right? All of these have been done in the past 5 or 6 years. I would argue that many of them are on their way to becoming household brands. And that's the path that I want to talk to you guys today about. So we're going to build a roadmap. And on this roadmap, we're going to lay out what are some of the steps and milestones that you need to go through to go from that obscure startup to household brand. As we think about this, I want you to think about a couple of concepts first. There's one type of advertising, it's called direct response, right? Direct response marketing is very ROI driven. It's very trackable. It's very data driven. I spend $1 on my direct response ads and I expect to get $2 back immediately. That's the type of advertising that direct response is. Some very famous direct response advertisements are infomercials, right? Think about some of the most famous infomercials, Snuggie, Slapchop, ShamWow. That's one type of advertising that's very, very different from another type of advertising. Let's think about traditional branding. And when I think about traditional branding, I think about ads that I would see on the Super Bowl. These are very different from an infomercial. Ads that I see on the Super Bowl, they don't typically have a call to action. There's no high pressure pitch. There's no call this 1-800 number, hurry fast while supplies last. And by the way, you're going to get this free extra bonus. That never happens in traditional branding. Okay, traditional branding is all about the emotion behind it. It's all about the sentiment, the feel, the message, the shareability. They would never do an infomercial to sell Coke or to sell sneakers. They're always going to focus in on the traditional branding. It's really interesting because as we talk about these two worlds of direct response and traditional branding, historically, those worlds hate each other. If you go talk to a hardcore direct response advertiser, they're going to be super critical of the traditional branding world. They're going to say things like, oh, that's not trackable. It's so expensive. It's all fluff. You might get an ROI at some point 6 months down the road, but you have no idea. But the same goes in reverse. You know, when you talk to the traditional branding people, they hate infomercials. They're like, oh, gross. Why would you ever put your customers through that experience? Why would you ever do that to your brand? Why, go all high pressure and salesy? That's just yuck. The traditional branders, they feel like they have to go take a shower after they've seen a direct response ad. They hate it that bad. But then if you go and look at the work that we've done at Harmon Brothers on Squatty Potty and Poopery and the like, you'll find that there are elements of both of these worlds that we bring together. So Harmon Brothers kind of lives here in the middle somewhere. Our focus has been saying, okay, there's a lot of good about direct response. You know, it's really good to be able to drive a direct ROI, to know that you can spend $1 and get back 2. But there's so much that's good about traditional branding as well. And so when you can bring those two worlds together and get the best of both worlds, it's a really, really great outcome. Why do we think of this like a spectrum and a timeline? I think of Snuggie, you know, one of the most famous infomercials of all time. Depending on what source you read, Snuggie sold somewhere between $300 and $500 million worth of Snuggies on their infomercial. Like, wildly successful, incredibly successful. They sold $300 to $500 million and never bothered to build a brand that stands the test of time. And in my mind, that's because Snuggie got comfortable and said, let's just stay here. We're successful, we have the sales coming in the door. Let's just live here. We're a direct response company, that's all we're ever going to be. Let's stick with that. They had their nice little 3 to 5 year run in the sun, and then they faded into obscurity. Nobody knows who they are anymore. No one knows where they're at. What if they had taken the time to take that success and go down this path of building a brand? Could they have ended up as a company that people know and remember and trust? I would argue, yes, they could have. I can think of a lot of examples where there are companies over here in the direct response camp who should never do traditional branding, at least not yet. One example that comes to mind for me is pets.com. You know, they're the famous .com bust. You know, they're the poster child of that boom and bust that happened. And pets.com was a brand new startup. They had this concept of, hey, let's sell pet supplies via the internet. And at that time, that was a very novel idea. And they went out and they raised a whole bunch of venture capital money from investors. So they had a few $1,000,000 in the bank. And immediately, they're like, okay, let's go buy some Super Bowl ads. And so it's this brand new startup, and they're literally buying Super Bowl ads to compete with the big boys in the big game. And what a waste of money. I mean, you're talking about spending millions of dollars on these ads for a company that only has a few $1,000,000 in the bank. It just doesn't make any sense. They would have been much better served by staying focused on direct response ads so that they could drive an immediate ROI and get the best use of their limited dollars because they're a young startup. If we take that example and we come back to this, you know, this timeline, this roadmap from going from obscure startup to household brand, sometimes it's helpful to think about that in terms of a journey that says, hey, when we're young as a company and we just need to keep the lights on, we need those sales coming in the door, let's start out very focused on our direct response ads. But let's make it a goal that over time, we're going to build in more and more elements. We're going to go through this hybrid phase. And over time, we're going to get to the point where we can advertise like a Nike or a Coca-Cola using traditional branding ads. To recap, don't be like pets.com where you just skip this whole path and go straight to traditional branding. But also don't be like Snuggie where you just get comfortable in the direct response world. Instead, start in the direct response world and then make it a goal to gradually progress towards traditional branding. So with that, I want to share a few steps that you can take to help get you along this path. So one of my mentors, Paul Ahlstrom, he wrote a book called Nail It Then Scale It. And it's the manual for how to go through the process of taking your product or your service and nailing it. And that's the part where you want to make sure that you have the perfect product market fit. This is where you want to Test and test and test until you find out that your product or your service is perfect for the market that you're going after. And only after you've gone through that process of nailing it that you shift your focus. Instead of focusing on nailing it, your focus goes into scale it. And that's a very different skill set and a very different approach to what you're doing. And so it's really, really important to understand, are you in the nail it phase or are you in the scale it phase? And so if you're looking at the life cycle of a business, usually the nail it phase is this short period up front. And then once you finish the nail it phase, you go into the scale it phase, and that's the majority of a business's growth, where, you know, if we were drawing out a graph of your growth, you're hoping that it looks somewhat like this, up and to the right. The late Clayton Christensen, I'm gonna try to paraphrase him. I hope I don't butcher this quote, but he said something to the effect of, early on, companies should be patient for growth and impatient for profits. I think that's a great way to think about the nail it phase. So when you're nailing it, be patient for growth. You don't need to push hard on the growth, but be impatient for profits, because those profits are a great indicator of, yes, I've nailed my product market fit, excuse me. But then Clayton said, you shift into a different phase where you need to be patient for profits and impatient for growth. That's the scale it phase. Because once you've nailed it, now you need to think about scaling it fast and aggressively. You want to take up that market share before your competitors can come in and copy what you nailed. You need to win the market share. And so that's the point where you get impatient for growth and you're patient for profits while you're really trying to scale. So two very different strategies, two very different ways to think about your approach to business. And so it's really important to know which you're in. If you're in the nail it phase, then get very hyper focused on iterating on your product, iterate on your service, iterate on your initial messaging until you get that right. When you're in the scale it phase, then you go into growth mode. For the purposes of the rest of our discussion, I'm going to assume that you've nailed your product or your service. You've gone through that process of testing and iteration to find, what do my customers need? How do I meet their needs and solve a real problem for them? So now let's talk about, first step for us is, how do we nail the messaging? And there's three major tools or processes that we use to nail that messaging. The first one is what we call message testing. Now, the reason we start here is because this is really low barrier to entry. You don't have to spend a bunch of money to do your message testing. So what we do is we just write out all of the different value propositions that we could find in our product or service, and then each one of those we test in its own text-based ad. So we'll go out and we'll do a series of ads that are text-based, so that we can compare each of the different value propositions that we've identified one against the other. And this helps us to determine which are the value propositions that are the most essential to our customers, or that perform the highest. And this allows us to rank all of the different value propositions that we've identified for our particular product or service. If you want details on how to do that, we have those available for you at harmonbrothersuniversity.com. I'm going to stay a little higher level right now. I'm going to go through these at a high level. If you want the in-depth playbook, like I said, you can get it at harmonbrothersuniversity.com. Okay, next is image architecture testing. So this is where we say, okay, it's not enough to just have text-based messaging. We need to know what are the images behind it that drive the results that we're looking for. And so in image architecture testing, what we do is we've created a taxonomy that breaks down all the different types of images. So some examples of different image taxonomies could be, okay, let's look at a lifestyle product image. So think about a runner that has a pair of Nike shoes on, and the images of those Nike shoes, but they're on the runner and they're out in the environment of running on a trail or whatever it is, versus just a product focused shot where it's white background and then there's just that Nike shoe or the pair of Nike shoes right there on a white background. So it's just very much focused on the product. That would be an example of a test where we would need to understand, for our product and for our audience, is the lifestyle image or is the product image alone going to be more effective in communicating what we need to communicate? And that's just one example. There are literally dozens or even hundreds of these different variations that you can look at. Another example could be, do you need the subjects in your images to be aspirational? Think about, really fit, beautiful models. Or do you need the subjects in your images to be relatable? When your customers see these images, do they need to be able to relate to the people who they're seeing and feel like those people are one of them? And that's another test that we can test in image architecture testing. Now, this is a little more intense than the message testing because obviously you have to have photography. You've got to do the work to come up with all the images so that you can test them. But once again, we use display ads to test which of these images and which of these architectures are the most effective for our product or service. And so you can tell that through these processes, first the message testing, then the image architecture testing, we're getting a ton of information about how we nail our messaging and how we position ourselves to our customers. Then we take this a step further into what we call a learning ad blitz, or for short, we call it LABS, learning ad blitz. What this is we take all of our learnings from the message testing and the image architecture testing, and we put them together in video form. But right now, the focus is on very low cost, entry level, low budget video to be able to test for as cheap as possible. So let me show you a couple examples of some learning ad blitz or LABS videos. Okay, here's another example of a LABS video. This one is for Murphy Ladder. You see that with Murphy Ladder, there are several features about it. There is the ease of storage. It can store in more places than other ladders, so you have a LABS video to cover storage. There is the ease of carrying it. It's much more portable than other ladders, and so you can have a LABS video built around that. But notice with all of these different LABS videos, we're trying to stay super low budget. We're not spending a ton of money on high production quality and all that stuff. We're just trying to get through this process of nailing the message so that we know we have that honed in. If you need specific details about any of these processes, message testing, image architecture testing, or LABS, you can find that in Harmon Brothers University. Some of the stuff is already available in Harmon Brothers University. Other parts of it we're still building out and teaching there, but you can see what's available there. So this gets us to the point where we've nailed our messaging. And so we can say, okay, your product's nailed, your messaging's nailed. That means you have nailed it, and now you're ready to scale it. And so that's where you get a shift into the scale it phase, and this is where things start to get fun. The first phase of the scale it process, we do what we call Harmon Brothers sprint campaigns. A sprint campaign, I'm going to show you a couple here in just a second, but a sprint campaign is designed to lean more towards the direct response side of the spectrum. It doesn't have a ton of branding elements in it. It's still very designed to get you sales, but we need to be able to scale those sales up. And so it takes everything we learned from the message testing down through the labs, and then we build it into one complete sell where we're taking the viewer all the way from, hey, I've never heard of this, to, holy smokes, I have this problem and I need this solution, and you've just built the credibility and overcome my concerns, and now I want it. Here, swipe my credit card, take my money. That's what the sprint campaign is designed to do. So before I showed you some labs examples with Murphy Ladder, now let me show you an example of a sprint campaign for Murphy Ladder.
With its patented side latch technology, you can compact the Murphy Ladder from tree size to vacuum size in just seconds. And with its quick release knobs, you can easily change from an A-frame to a leaning ladder, or to an extended ladder, or to a bazooka. It's a Murphy Ladder, a lightweight 3-in-1 ladder that folds up into 1/4 its size. See, the Murphy Ladder was invented by a real fireman who saw how professional firefighting ladders easily folded to fit through tight spaces. So he built one for the home. And thanks to its slim design, the Murphy Ladder can be stored anywhere you put a vacuum. In the garage, closet, pantry,
Under the bed?
the Murphy Ladder is easy to carry, quick to set up, and compact to store. Basically, the complete opposite of children.
No thanks.
But he's so cute. Normal ladders are too bulky, long, and awkward to carry around the house. So either you risk dinging up your walls, doors, and cars every time you use them, or you settle for death-defying step stools and chairs. Oh, mother bear! I've heard. The Murphy Ladder, on the other hand, is so portable, you can easily navigate tight corners and door frames without damage. The Murphy Ladder is convenient enough for homeowners and strong enough for contractors. Plus, it comes in 3 different sizes. So if you want a ladder that doesn't suck to move or store, click the link and get a Murphy Ladder today. With its no-slip rounded feet, the Murphy Ladder is safe for you and your home. It's designed to grip and stay planted at multiple angles, yet soft enough to avoid scratching your walls and floors. And unlike finger guillotines, telescoping ladders, the Murphy Ladder's no-pinch design keeps your fingers safe and definitely not severed. The Murphy Ladder is so sturdy, it's rated for 375 pounds, but it's been tested to hold over 1,000 pounds with no damage. So, in summary, your mama's so fat she could use this safely. Up top. All right. You don't need bulky ladders you never use. You need a Murphy Ladder you'll use all the time. So if you want a ladder that won't decimate your house, hallways, or hands, Murphy Ladder is available at Home Depot. Drop by your local store and pick yours up today.
So you'll notice it's a little higher budget, a little higher production value than what we were doing with the labs. That's okay, because now we know that we've nailed it and we're trying to scale this up. Hopefully the sprint campaign gets you through your first couple $1 million in sales. It's a little higher budget than the labs, but notice it still isn't like those other campaigns that we're famous for, like Squatty Potty and Poopery, and I think of Fiberfix, where we're throwing cars off of a cliff, right? We haven't gone anywhere near that budget. And the reason is because we always think, do it cheap before you do it expensive. Okay, you want to make sure that things are nailed before you're really going to scale them up. So hopefully with these sprint campaigns, you can get your first, let's call it $2 to $4 million in sales. And that allows you the freedom and the flexibility to go into the next phase. And the next phase is where you start to really have fun. And this is where you're going to say, okay, now we need to start building in some branded elements. And so this is where we do our Harmon Brothers hero campaigns. These are the campaigns that we're famous for. The reason we call it a hero campaign is because it follows the hero's journey. So Donald Miller wrote a famous book called How to Build a Story Brand. And in it, he argues that stories are the most effective form of communication for any human being. If you think about it, our ancestors passed information down from generation to generation using stories. And one of the most effective story formats ever is called the hero's journey. In fact, if you look at the IMDb top 100 list of all-time top 100 list of Hollywood films, you'll find that, can't remember the exact number, but it's something over 80 of those films follow the hero's journey format. And so if we take that format and we apply it to our marketing and our advertising, then we drastically raise our chances of making something memorable and making something that sticks with our viewer and with our customer. So the key to how this works is to make sure that you understand that your customer is the hero in their own journey. So if we're thinking about Star Wars, Luke is the hero of the story. Our customer would be the equivalent to Luke. But now we're going to introduce a brand character. So in the case of purple mattresses, it's our Goldilocks character, who's dropping the eggs on top of the mattress. She's this brand character that if we were comparing her to Star Wars, she would be Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay, she's not the hero of the story, Luke is. She is just the guide. So as Obi-Wan Kenobi guides Luke, our brand character, in this case Goldilocks, guides the viewer or the customer. Now we introduce the product or the service. Once again, the product or the service is not the hero, the customer is. The product or the service is just a tool to help to help the hero along their journey to become successful. So as Obi-Wan Kenobi gave Luke the lightsaber and taught him to use the Force, those were the tools that Luke needed to go become successful in his own journey. And in the case of Purple Mattress, Goldilocks presents the purple mattress or the tool, the lightsaber, and gives it to the customer, the hero, to become successful in their own journey. A construct to understand. And once you understand that, then it allows you to take everything that you've done before, all the message testing that you did, the sprint campaign that really starts to scale those sales up. You take all of that and you integrate it into this brand story where you have your brand character and the product that is presented to your customer. And this allows you to make something truly memorable. You can incorporate humor into it. You can create a brand universe. Think about Squatty Potty. The brand universe becomes this, this mythical fairy tale land where everything is cute and fun, and then you have this, this unicorn and prince who live in that land. So it makes it much more memorable because you have the humor, you have the brand universe. You can incorporate a brand voice, right? Sometimes your brand voice can be sentimental. Other times your brand voice can be humorous. You're establishing these elements that now, instead of just being a pitch of, hey, I want to sell you something, now you're creating the story, that hero's journey, that allows this to be so memorable. And if you do it right, humor is a great tool for making it really, really shareable. Then this can be something that not only do people comment on and engage with, but they share it with their friends, they talk about it at the dinner table, they dress up on Halloween as your brand character because you've made this so memorable. And this is a really, really powerful point to get to, because now when your customer's walking through the store and they think, oh man, they see your product sitting on the shelf, and instead of thinking, oh yeah, I heard about that, that is supposed to do something for me that helps me. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think I saw something about that. Instead, they remember all these images that you've just created for them. In the case of Squatty Potty, oh yeah, I remember that unicorn, that was so funny, I laughed so hard at that, and I shared it with my friend, and all these positive emotions well up inside of them. And then it helps them remember, oh yeah, and that is the tool that can help me become successful on my journey to, overcome, in the case of Squatty Potty, it's overcome gross stuff like hemorrhoids and whatnot. But it still is overcoming a real problem and helping the customer be successful on that journey. So that is the hero portion of this. That's what we're famous for. Once again, in Harmon Brothers University, we teach people how to do that. And so if you're interested in that, you can go there and check it out. So we talked about humor. It's a great tool to make things shareable, but not all ads have to be humorous. We've done ads that are not humorous and they've still been wildly successful. Humor just happens to be a tool that makes things really, really shareable. And so that gives you a built-in advantage. And so we love to use humor, but it's not necessary. Once you get through the hero phase, this is where stuff starts to get really fun. And this is where you're going into strictly branded material. And we have a style of video that we like to call sidekicks. And that's kind of referring to, hey, we've created this hero, now let's create a bunch of sidekick material around it. So let me show you an example. So for Chatbooks, in the hero campaign, we built out this real mom, this real family, where she is facing all the craziness of the life of a mom, and then Chatbooks comes in and helps her become a hero in her own journey. And then we created a whole bunch of sidekick campaigns to support that, to further develop the universe, to further develop that character, to develop the story and that world, and to make it all so much more memorable. So many of the famous brands out there lean into this strategy of really building out that brand character and that brand world. Some examples that come to mind, the Geico Gecko. That's a character that's been developed over many, many years. I think of, Dos Equis, Most Interesting Man in the World. There was that multi-year series where we're getting to know this character and connecting with them. And then, of course, they had their contract dispute or whatever, and so they got rid of one Most Interesting Man in the World and brought in a new one, and the internet went into revolt. Everybody hated him. They're like, this new guy sucks. It's because we connected with that original character, and you can't just dispose of a character that connects with people at that level and just bring someone else in and expect them to just be a replacement. That's because these characters and these brand worlds, these brand universes, they're powerful, and the connection and the sentiment that happens there is real. There are many of you out there who are starting way over here. You're at this point where you're just getting started and you're saying, holy smokes, I see some of the cool stuff being done out here, and I just don't know how to compete on that level. I just don't know how to get there. I hope your takeaway from this is to say, you don't have to compete on this level over here. In fact, you shouldn't compete on this level over here yet because you haven't gone through these steps yet. And so it's very simple for you. You just need to go into this message testing phase. And once you get through that, you're going to go into that sprint phase where you're really focused on the sale. You need to get those sales growing. Then after that, you'll be able to graduate into more of the hero style campaign where you're still focused on sales, but you're also building the brand and making it memorable. There are also many people or many companies who are living over here in this world, and while they're there, they're saying, oh man, we're just not seeing the ROI that we need on our efforts. And we're spending all this money on marketing, and it's not driving the results that we need to get. And we need some adjustments, we need some changes, or else we're going to be in trouble. And usually the answer to that is that they usually need to take a step backwards and say, okay, we've been working on building our brand, but we haven't really honed in on the sale yet. And we need to take a step backwards to really get honed in on that sale. So whether you're over here or whether you're over here, you need to stop thinking about this as an either-or proposition. I'm not either indirect response or traditional branding. Instead, I'm somewhere on a spectrum between them. And I need to find out where I'm at on that spectrum. Maybe it's way over here, maybe it's in the middle, maybe it's somewhere around here. But wherever you're at, find where you're at on that spectrum, focus in there, and don't move up the spectrum until you've figured that portion of it out. That pretty much summarizes the path that we guide our clients down to get them to go from obscure startup to household brand. We'd love to help you on that journey as well. Whether you're more in the DIY camp and you just need some guidance and help on this, HarmonBrothersUniversity.com is a great place to get some guidance on it. If you'd like a little more hand-holding, reach out to us. We can see if we can provide some coaching or some guidance on that front. Or if you're in a position where you'd like to hire us to help you with any of these campaigns, by all means, please reach out to us. Just go to HarmonBrothers.com, drop us a line there. We'll get in touch with you and see if there's any way that we can help you on your journey to becoming a household brand. And with that said, make sure to stay in touch with me. I'm most active on LinkedIn. Hit me up there. Ask me any questions. I'd love to hear from you. I sure appreciate your time and attention. Thanks for listening. See you next time.